And we are recording now, so any questions? Clear as mud, right? Somebody tell me what has been the biggest aha moment for you in the first 5 chapters of First Timothy. You didn't know this was going to be a test, did you? You should know me by now.
You've been threatening the quiz, but you haven't popped out yet.
It's like when you walked into the classroom and the teacher brings in that pop quiz, right?
If you're lucky, it's open note.
Yeah. Well, it is. You got your Bible there, right?
Yeah, I got my notepad here too.
There you go. Open note. Okay. Well, if you think about it, pop in with it when you do. And we're going to move forward from there. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the scriptures. And while I'm doing that, if you find something, if it was an aha moment, it should have been on the tip of your tongue. So it's kind of hard now to turn something into an aha moment that wasn't one before. Right?
I got a big arrow next to this one.
Okay, there you go. What is it?
This one was the statement I think that you made with the hypocritical liars. It says, "A wise man receives correction, but a foolish man despises correction."
Yeah. That's good. Anybody else?
Just a lot of times we don't accept the correction that when it's given, we plant our feet and try to. So
we absolutely right. We go on the defensive, right? We're gonna defend ourselves whether we're right or whether we're wrong, right? And we're good at doing both, right? But what we're weak in sometimes is admitting that we were wrong, right?
Yeah.
So chapter 6, who would like to read the first 2 verses?
I'll read it.
Go ahead.
All who are under the yoke of slavery should consider their masters worthy of full respect, so that God's name and our teaching may not be slandered. Those who have believing masters are not to show less respect for him because they are brothers. Instead, they are to serve them even better, because those who benefit from their service are believers and dear to them. These are things you are to teach and urge on them.
So what is he saying?
Don't look for special favors.
Okay.
Because you know them. And show them the respect due.
It just kind of more so reminds me, well, I agree with that. It's more so reminds me of like if they're believers, you give them even like respect them even more and give them like what you can, because essentially of the phrase that I don't remember where it was, but we had read it in a past chapter that essentially like working for, like they're what am I trying to say? Oh God.
Work for them as you were working for the Lord.
Yeah, like
yeah.
That okay.
Yep.
I'll just shush.
and because when the person you're working for is a believer and you working for them are also a believer, you're mutually benefiting from one another. The employee is benefiting from the believer's business that he has up and running that provides you a job, and the believer who owns the business is benefiting from your diligent labor and your faithful labor that you're providing the company that he runs, right?
Well, just like in the bottom of the verse, it says, there are the things you are to teach and urge onto them.
Right.
We're to show the younger people, being the older people of the church, we're to show them how to be better at being a Christian, and how to use your words right. Like she was saying, teach them to do better.
Right.
I'll be honest. This is one that I know I'm working on.
Yeah.
That I have times where I don't give that full respect that my bosses deserve.
Oh, there was many times in the past, not in the church, but that I had a boss that I considered stupid. Okay. And that wasn't right. That was years ago, but that was not right. Boy, did I give him a hard time behind his back at home. Woo!
And instead, what should we be doing? Even if our boss is what we might call ignorant or stupid, how should we actually handle that?
Well, we're to try to maybe say something, to let them know that we're on their side, but we think it might be differently. But the thing of it is that ain't what I did. And he might have fit the cause, but God help him because it wasn't his fault. And we shouldn't have done that. We should have been working as unto God. Most of the time I did that. When I was doing the job, I did it like as though it was my own business. I respected that most of the time. There were times, yeah, that I thought, wow, I'm guilty. Thank God it was a while
And
back,
probably
a long
most
time
of us
ago.
have been at some point or another, right? But
Yeah,
the thing that we should do is that we should give diligent and faithful service, because who's the one who knows if we're slacking off and not giving 100%,
well, that's what I said. You're to do it as unto the Lord. We're
right?
working for God, not that man.
Right.
Even
And
though we're
so,
working for the man, but we're working as unto the Lord, and you're supposed to do whatever you do with all your might.
right. And then you're praying for your boss at night when you get home. Pray that God will
Yeah,
open and enlighten the eyes of his understanding, right?
that's not what I was doing.
Well, I know, and a lot of times that's
Woo!
not what we do, right?
I think we've all been
We
there.
go to the pub and we like to throw down a couple of shots and then talk bad about them, right? So,
Well, I didn't
Nicole,
go to the pub, but I did not talk good about him.
well, that was just a figure of speech, because
I
the
know
point
what
is,
you. I know what you
we go to
meant.
that
Yeah,
place where gossip and
yeah.
everything takes place, and then we slander our bosses in public, right? So
Nicole told me I should share the story that I told her about today. I had to go do an inspection. They're trying to fill a water main, so I had to check and make sure that the vise they're using is correct. And so I was told to be out there at 8:30, and I was running a little late. I got out there at 9, and nobody out there. So I call up one of the guys I work for, and then and say, hey, what's going on? Who do you have out here? And he says, oh well, we call him. So he calls them and says, well, they had to get some parts. They had some stuff break, so they're gonna be there in an hour and a half ish. I'm like, okay, well that's like 10:30, 11 o'clock, something like that. So okay, I'll come back. So I went, did some other things, got back at 11, and they're still not there. I'm like, well, Taco Bell's right here. I'll get lunch. So I went and got lunch, and I contributed to that COVID-19 we were talking about yesterday that we're adding on, and I'm sitting there eating, and pretty soon it's 11:45. There's still nobody there. Well, I called the guy up again. I said, well, are these guys coming? Or they? So finally, he's like, he called him back, and they said they'll be there in 10 minutes. Okay, so I wait, and the guy finally shows up. He comes up, and he's like, I'm so sorry. just one thing after another happened today, and I'm like, oh, that's okay. And so I go look at his parts, and he's like, man, I really thought you were gonna chew me out. I'm like, stuff happens, and, but we were talking and talking about I got a chance to actually minister with him about some of the stuff we've been talking about in Revelation and whatnot. So it was really cool.
praise the Lord.
Yeah, really cool experience.
Oh, that's
Good.
wonderful. Thank you, Lord, for that opportunity, right?
Right.
All right. Anybody else?
I know trying to teach this to younger, I tried to talk to my almost 30-year-old daughter, and they have a hard time if you compare worker employee relationships to master slave relationships, because slavery has been painted as only one way. in their picture in their minds, and they think you're disrespecting the people who were slaves by saying that when you're under contract to another person, it's really an equivalency type comparison. When you compare, I mean, the yoke of slavery is not necessarily, you've been bought and sold. The fact is, you sell your soul to the company man, they said, as the old song says, or the song says. People are on contracts that they can't break easily, but for whatever reason, they find it to be very disrespectful to compare a job to slavery. I understand part of it, but I also understand it's part of that just be offended at everything thing. So it's hard to teach these lessons because they find some reasons not to listen to it.
Okay, and I receive that, and we know that's true, all across the board. Some people think it's their God-given right to run their boss down, right? So, and that it's just because they don't know, and we don't know because we're not willing to actually dig in and find out. Sometimes it's easier to just join in with the crowd and to join in with those that like to bash. And, it's easy to be drawn into that. And we've all been there. We're all guilty.
Well, it's the humility aspect of realizing, and especially like in some cases when what you did made your boss look good and you didn't really get credit for it. And it really means putting a lot of humility into it. I mean, there might be a time to get credit, but there are a lot of times you're not going to get credit for what you do. You're just there. No matter, you just try to be as good as you can,
right,
for your sake, and that's not easy to do because we like to feel like our work is acknowledged.
very true.
I agree with you. I'm just giving you a little insight on because the first time I read the word slavery, I really had to sit back and think about it. But just a little insight. A lot of people don't want to know the history behind that word itself, because for me, I like the Greek mythology, and I like learning about Rome and all of that, just because it's something I do. But back in the day, that just was the term, and so I think a lot of younger people now, my age, the 30-year-old-ish age, a lot of them just don't understand that job or employee or employer was not a term way back when. So I think a lot of them get defensive because they only know the term slavery as in the American history word of slavery with the whole blacks and whites. But then for me personally, I've taken the time to understand that it's not employer way back when the Bible was written. So I think that's also part of it, is that a lot of younger people and maybe even older people sometimes don't stop to think that slavery doesn't necessarily mean in our day and age, slaves like it did back in American history, but way back when it meant employer employee kind of a thing.
Can I say this? There's a difference. We are paid for our jobs. The slaves weren't being paid. They were giving a place to stay, but they really were slaves, and they were beaten sometimes and everything else. They had to do what the master wanted. But today you have the choice. You can quit and leave if you don't like it. But you are paid, so that's your choice. You're a slave to whatever you're doing, and we should be, but we're paid, so we have an option to leave if we don't like it.
Absolutely.
Some people don't always feel like they do, but also we're asked to be servants to God and say really to be slaves to the Lord. So it's, and Israel had there, you were allowed to be freed from slavery every
7 years. 7 years.
or every Jubilee. But if you chose, you could choose to stay a slave to that person, and they would clip your ear and you were theirs for life. So it's a different concept. In some areas of the world, you still have this going on anyway. But the fact was, Israel, if you followed the guidelines of God, treated those people better. And I know a lot of people who feel like they can't leave their job. And I realize technically they can leave, but in reality, I mean, just like technically a slave can run away, but in reality, they don't always see an option of how to do that. And I guess that's why we look to Christ for what is a healthy servant master relationship. And that's what this is saying, is how to look at it from a healthy perspective and realize, that you're working for God when you work for others, even if it feels like you.
Yeah, and Jesus himself said that, or not Jesus, but John said, I must decrease, but he must increase. And so we are making the master look good, and we don't take any credit for it because he gave us what we have. And so all of the credit and everything belongs to him. But I can remember that, early on, and, I've been around a few years now, that they used to say, things like, the General Motors mentality and the day and age in which we live in, where we think we're entitled to everything. I'm entitled to this, I'm entitled to that. And when I first came up in the workforce, it was pretty much people weren't giving you a job. The standpoint was, I'm not giving you nothing. You're going to earn every dollar that I pay you. You're going to give me a fair day's labor, and I'm going to give you a fair day's pay for that labor. And we're going to get along fine. When you don't give me a fair day's wage or a fair day's labor, I'm not going to give you a fair day's wage. Right? So if people still had that work ethic today, then we wouldn't be in such an entitled society that we find ourselves in today, right?
Yep.
And that's basically, in my mind, what this is kind of talking about as well. So, verse 3, I think we're going to cover a lot here. So let's go 3 through 10.
All right. If anyone teaches false doctrines and does not agree to the sound instruction of our Lord Jesus Christ and to godly teaching, he is conceited and understands nothing. He has an unhealthy interest in controversies and quarrels about words that result in envy, strife, malicious talk, evil suspicions, and constant friction between men of corrupt mind, who have been robbed of the truth and who think that godliness is a means to financial gain.
Oops. Jumped on me. Sorry.
I had the words. But godliness with contentment is great gain. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. People who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs.
So what's he talking about?
Well, I think he's talking literally about gain, money here. And people do fall into temptations because they start looking down on others because they don't have as much as them. And they also think that they have more liberties. They can take advantage of things, they just start, they want more power and more power and more power.
Mhm.
And it turns them into a money grubber. I don't know. It's no good.
Pastor, can you scroll that just a little bit? I think it's possible to get all 10 of these on the screen, but I'm trying to. That first part was interesting. Some of it.
Yeah, it doesn't really. The 3 through all, it won't really all fit hardly, but close.
It's interesting that the summary. A lot of times I look at sections like you would a term paper, where it kind of starts with an introduction and ends with a summary. And the summary is kind of odd because it says that the truth who think that godliness is a means to financial gain. So all of that teaching of false doctrine is trying to use the truth for false gain, and they think they can do it. That's the part, I guess. And some succeed. I think some people use godly type things and succeed in making money. In the end, it gets to them, but it looks like they're succeeding along the way. As they create I mean, look at how many TV shows and things show this subterfuge that goes on amongst well-off people, where they create envy and strife and malice, talk and suspicions and all that kind of stuff. For some reason, a lot of people, my dad's family, they weren't rich by any means, but for some reason, some of his brothers and sisters really enjoyed there being dissension within the family. Some of them we didn't find out until they died. When his brother died, they found out that he was, and I know he was holding on to a toolbox that his sister had blamed my dad for taking. And for some reason, he never bothered to give it back. He just liked it. Some people, I don't know why they like it, but they like seeing that people be uncomfortable. And it's just odd that they end that summary by saying that they're using godliness as a means to get there. That's a weird statement.
And in 9, it also says, people who want to get rich fall into temptations and traps.
Mm-hmm.
We will, if we keep looking for something better, we think it's better, but it's not better. We're not content with what we are today as a good walking Christian. You study to show yourself approved. And money ain't going to get that for us. It's just ourselves doing it. Nobody can give it to us but us and the Lord.
Right.
I like number 6 too. Be content with what he gave you.
Yeah.
That's the key and pivotal verse of this whole passage, is that godliness with contentment is great gain, right? So the false teachers that it starts off talking about, some of these false teachers were there for financial gain. They wanted to come in with all of the unhealthy controversies, quarrels, and false teaching, just as a way of, it looked like an easy way to make money. Religion looked like an easy way to make money, right?
Yeah, we did.
People still accuse pastors of that today. You only work one day a week, right?
They don't know their pastor very well then.
They don't.
I always find how words are similar, like contempt and contempt are very similar.
Yeah.
And I noticed that temptation, I guess contempt is in there, so I guess contempt is a word talking about contentment. But have you met people? I've met people, that really have contempt for godliness. They can't be content because they just think godliness is just stupid or for the weak or whatever. They really do have contempt for it, and if it's connected to temptation, I'd have to look up the etymology of the words. But if it is, I guess that makes sense based on this set of verses.
Well, godliness has its own rewards. That's what we covered in the previous chapters. That godliness has its own rewards. So godliness with contentment and the other areas of your life is of great gain. because the way you maintain godliness is by not becoming, filled with wantonness for more and more, covetousness, and all of those things, which are the distractions and the temptations that are all around us each and every day, right? And so,
And those are the things that lead to contempt. Okay. That makes
yeah,
sense.
and we all have a need to make money in order to live. I mean, we all have to have a job, or we have to have some means of being supported, whether that's through the government because we're disabled or whatever it might be. We all have to have money in order to survive. But what it's saying here is that to make sure that in your making money, it isn't with a constant wantonness for more and more and more and more money, to be content with the wages that you're receiving, and let God bring increase when he sees fit to bring increase. And, if you have food and clothing and the basic necessities of life, then basically you have everything that you need, right? You heard me say this already. I look out in my own yard, and I've got a motor home and 2 boats and 2 trailers and 2 side-by-sides. And it's like, I've got all this stuff and I don't even really want it anymore. I don't even hardly use it, and so trying to figure out now how to get rid of it and get by on less and be content with less is harder than accumulating it was, right?
Yeah. And verse 10 there starts out, a lot of people, I think, misquote that, and they drop the all kinds of evil. But it's not the root of all evil, but it is the root of a lot of different kinds of evil.
And again, money's not the root of all evil. The love
Right.
of money is.
Well,
The root of all evil. If you could handle riches and still be content, then God would bless you. I've said over and over again, just like Pastor Joey does, God's never allowed me to be a millionaire because he can't trust me with it.
Yeah.
I
And
give
the
it away.
rest of that verse is clearly, it summarizes the prodigal son exactly.
Yeah.
That he tried for the money, he wandered from the faith, and he found himself eating with the pigs because of it.
Because he was not happy the way he was brought up. He was selfish.
And it happens over and over again that the constant
Absolutely, yeah.
pursuit of more, the constant pursuit of more money and more things and more stuff, and then having to maintain it all and all of that will eventually take you away from the important things like faith and family, right?
I know people that they start to gain a little bit of money and they got to have a second house. They just got to have one in Florida. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
If we have a house here and we have food and clothing and we got a job or we're retired or whatever, we are rich. Look at the
Yes.
rest of the world. We are absolutely rich.
Yeah.
Oh, this
Okay.
country, even the poor people in this country are wealthy compared
Are
to most
rich.
of
Yes.
the rest of the population.
Yes.
And
So
it's sad that they don't realize how well off they have it.
right. And you really want to be rich. When you don't have a lot, take a little and give it to somebody else when they need it. If you hear somebody say they're short $10, don't make them beg for it, man. Just
Give
hand
them
them the
$20.
$10. Say, here, I feel led to give you this.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, how many people do that? Okay. And I'm not patting myself on the back saying I always do that, but I have, you know what I'm saying? I feel if I can see a little need like that I can meet, I love to do it. And I don't have to tell nobody about it. You know what I'm saying? I don't
Absolutely.
want
Yes.
them to tell
Yep.
nobody about it.
You
That's
shouldn't.
between me and them.
You have to tell people about it. You've already gotten your reward, right?
Right. I just did just then. But what I'm saying is, it's a good example because when you get much money, you want to hang on to much money. You like to see them pennies grow. It just gets to where it's a sickness. It's actually a sickness. Some people, and like these ministers, they just can't get enough. And they're lying to these people, tell them, hurry to the phone. Isaiah 55 says, send $55 right now or $550. And get it in there. Hurry up right now. Get to the phone. Come on. What do they say? Something about if you wait, you're sinning because you're waiting. God said, give it. You know what I mean? But they get great gain there. I mean, these are evil. These are evils. Okay. And hey, I fell into that when I was younger. You know what I'm saying? Go to the phone. Oh, you're gonna get this. You know, it's just ridiculous.
So
that
would
we
you
even
follow
fall
that?
into
if I
that.
told you that?
Huh?
Would you follow that if I told you that?
No.
Okay, I was just.
I give you a rotten apple.
He doesn't want 55. He just wants 54.
Yeah.
He just
made
wants
up that-
4.
I made up the scripture because I don't even know what Isaiah 55 says, but you get my point.
I
Well,
know.
he should go 119.
I was going to say, you
Yeah.
better watch out, Pastor.
Yeah. Yeah, so people would come in, you know, and I know what you're saying because it happens all the time. It does, and
Yeah.
you know, when
The flip side of that, though, is you see a lot of people who don't believe in God that give. So, like usual, if you follow what God's teaching, even if you don't believe, you still get a reward. And that's why people do it a lot, because it makes them feel better. The unfortunate thing is they don't understand the reason behind it.
well, and you know, you're right about the belief thing, but again, you know, a man will reap what he sows is a spiritual law that cannot be changed.
Right.
And whether you're a believer, you're not a believer, you're not going to change that law.
No.
It's a spiritual law of the universe. And so whether you're a believer or you're not a believer, if you sow right things, you're going to reap the right harvest.
I
If
just
you sow
heard an
wrong things,
atheist.
you're gonna reap a wrong harvest, you know. And so a lot of people that are, you know, incarcerated today, if they were honest with themselves, their answer would be, I'm just reaping what I sowed. I sowed and I'm reaping. And I don't much like my harvest, but I don't know what to do about it, right?
I
And
just heard an atheist who's smart enough to know that he says, I like the 10 Commandments. I don't necessarily believe the rest of the Bible, but following the 10 Commandments for his life, he knows it's going to make his life less, as it says there, he's going to have less griefs if he follows those guidelines. Unfortunately, he doesn't believe, but at least he knows he's smart enough to understand that if you follow those basic guidelines, your
yeah,
grief
and
will.
the danger of that is then you start believing that you're a good person because you did that, and then you've treaded under feet the precious blood of Jesus Christ and done despite to the Spirit of grace, and not even realizing that you've done it, right?
Oh, I didn't say he's not in for a surprise when things start
Oh
going
yeah,
sideways.
right.
But as long as he follows it, in some ways it's almost worse for him because he will have less grief and therefore he won't see his need for God,
Right.
which is what we talked about this morning. The fact that so many people are feeling so much distress. Unfortunately, some give up and are killing themselves, but hopefully a lot of them, it's like God often uses difficulties to try to wake you up to find him and thereby find their way back or to him, either back to or to him for the first time, which is what I pray for every day.
Yep. Unfortunately, a lot of people are learning the hard way here, and you know, the last you know, year or two, not just in the last 11 weeks here, but in the last year or two, because the increase of things that have happened and things that go wrong and the up and downs of the stock market, they're all there to teach everybody they've got their eggs in the wrong basket, you know.
Just like
I never
look at the
understood-
floods. You
I
know,
never. Sorry.
So I've got almost 10 minutes after 6, so that we'll stop right there for today at verse 10. That means we'll be 1 Timothy 6:11 tomorrow before we head into the weekend then. And whether we get through it or not remains to be seen. I forgot how many verses there is altogether. Yeah, we'll get through it tomorrow. 11 through 21 tomorrow. We should make it through it tomorrow.
Do we start with 11?
Yeah, we're going to start with verse 11, Paul's charge to Timothy.
Okay.
Okay. And then we should be able to finish up the rest of the book then. So I'm going to stop my screen share right there and stop the